thank you all for coming. My name is Ben with the Rising Artists Foundation. We, along with the Honcho crew, are putting on this Fourth River program. So it's 6 weeks. This is week 6 of 6. It involves some creative incubation for a cohort of grantees here, as well as these weekly music industry panel discussions. So this is the last one. We want to quickly thank our sponsors: Pittsburgh Cultural Trust, Citizens Bank, the Mac Miller Fund, Resident Advisor, Ableton, and the Paul R. Judy Grant. And we're also just going to quickly plug the showcase that is kind of the culminating show of the program, which will be next month. It'll be on December 20th. Over at the Hot Mask Club, will be announced soon. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And so thank you all for coming. So today we are talking about releasing music. In a moment, you guys can introduce yourselves, but just to give you a quick overview of sort of how this is going to go today, we're going to have a discussion for about 45 minutes. Then we are going to jump into a Q&A. Fab has got to head to a flight in the middle of that.
I think it's probably a casualty of our government shutdown.
TSA, I mean, just Irish goodbye.
Yeah. Just drop your mic in the middle. And so if any questions, save them for the Q&A. And so you guys can introduce yourselves.
Ladies first. Hello, everyone. I am Fabienne Leys. Everyone calls me Fab. And I am a manager of artists. I'm based in New York, and I'm at a company called ATC, which has offices across London, New York, Nashville now, and Los Angeles. It's nice to meet you all.
I'm Adam Farrell. I'm the creative director at Loma Vista Recordings. We are mostly based out in Los Angeles. And I'm sure we'll explain what a creative director is, but largely I'm in charge of the storytelling around the artist visually and across all the ways that you reach fans and build an audience, which is rapidly changing. And I'm sure we'll get into that as well.
Cool. So I guess we've got a handful of questions from the Fourth River grantees ahead of time. So a lot of this will be from that, but let's get into it. So I guess talking about just releasing music and putting out a single or an EP or an album, just to kind of frame this conversation, how do each of you define a successful release, like a release campaign or releasing a project? How do you see it as working?
Well, I think you work at a record label, so that's going to be different than a manager's idea of success, because I feel like in my experience in working with artists, they all have different benchmarks of what they consider to be a success within their career. I mean, there's always the high range goal of critical acclaim, winning an award, having a song that's on the top 10 of the Hot 100 or a sold out tour. But from my vantage point, it's when you're able to collectively work alongside your team and your artist and reach those goals, whether they're small or large. Everything kind of feels like a win. Like I had an artist, I've been working with her for 11 years, and the first show we put up in LA was for the Bootleg Theater, which is capacity of 250. And we sold it out. And it just, we all felt like we had sold out, I don't know what the stadium is called here, but she said, it just feels like that. So I think that's part of the reward of what's successful. But yeah, objectively speaking, it's like when an artist can sustain themselves and then some, by creating and releasing their art, not have to worry about having a day job. I think that's bare minimum.
I mean, I think Fab said it great. I mean, I think it's what I try and do, and I think what Fab tries to do is really understand the artist's goals and their intention the story they're trying to tell around their music. And I always feel like, I get asked this question a lot, what defines success? And I think when there's alignment with management, the artist, the record label, the booking agent, and you all feel like you're marching down the field and in a harmonious way, generally that indicates some level of success. And so when you have that alignment, when you have that feeling of we're all trying to accomplish the same thing together, even if you're not reaching the objective goals in terms of streams or sellouts, you collectively feel like you are advancing the artist's career in a positive way. And so that's when I know we're doing great.
For an artist with no team who's just getting started and doing something on their own, like, how do you define those goals?
Like if somebody's just sitting in their bedroom making beats?
Yeah, and just getting started, like, before,
I mean, I don't know. Who's an artist in here? I'm just curious, like, okay, great, okay.
Pretty much everyone. Welcome.
Great. I go back to intent, right? I always feel like, and when I'm talking to an artist early and talking about a new song or a project, what I try and do is understand the story that they're trying to tell through their music, right? What is the impact they're trying to have? What does the music say and mean? Because I think the stronger the connection between what you do to build the world around a project, the stronger you understand that as an artist, the more anyone can help you. Either the simplistic, someone helping you out with social media, and if you're doing it yourself, I think the good news is, historically, labels and other folks in the industry have been gatekeepers and withheld access to the marketplace, or you needed them to access the marketplace. The good news right now is that outside of budget and stuff like that, you generally have access to the same resources that I do in setting up a project. You won't have as much money, but in terms of the core things that you need to do to get the word out, we don't, as record labels or distributors, have a lock on those resources. The bad news is everyone has access to those resources, so there's a real glut of things. So how do you make yourself distinct? How do you create a sense of like uniqueness or intentionality behind the music? And a lot of that, I think, draws back to like, and this is a tough thing to really conceptualize, but authenticity, like do it your way, and don't do it in a way where you're worried about if you put something up on TikTok or whatever you do, everyone starts with like 10 views or something like that. You know what I mean? The biggest artist in the world at one point started with that many. I think you have to just persist to believe in what you're doing and to communicate to fans and audience in a way, and set little goals. It's 5 people paying attention to what you want to do, 10 people. Just don't think about press, don't think about anyone else. Think about the kind of fan that you want to connect with and nurture those fan bases. Because if you can build up a fan base of 500 to 1,000 people, I remember John Darnielle from the Mountain Goats one time told me, he's like, I think I have 1,000 hardcore fans, and I've had a career for 30 years. And I think setting those little goals for yourself and not worrying about day-to-day what you're doing, but think about where I want to be in 6 months and 12 months. And I think that's a really good way to think about things so that you don't get discouraged, because it can be, you look at the bands that are blowing up right now, like a Turnstile or a Geese, they've been around for 10 years. There are probably times where those bands were, sitting in a room in Cincinnati and had 10 people come to a show and probably rejected and felt dejected. So I think that kind of set small incremental measurable goals to yourself. And the most important thing is make great music. And focus on that craft, because that's the one thing that you can control the most. I don't know. Fab?
I don't know. I feel like you kind of just put a period on that. But yeah, it really is just like, I think there's a certain blend of like, most artists are equally insecure as they are insane, right? Because there's some level of insanity that comes with creating something out of your pure imagination, and then wanting that to go out into the world and have it connect to other people. So yeah, authenticity is like the first step, and not trying so hard to look outward. Inspiration comes in many different ways, but don't look around and be like, well, if I'm not doing what this DJ's doing on Instagram, then I got to do what that guy's doing. He's got lasers in his basement. Like, you don't you got to stay very clear on like what your vision is and who you are, and that will help you understand the type of fan that you ultimately want to reach. I think that's like the first step, is just what's your reason? Define your reason.
100%.
Yeah.
Got to start there.
So given that certainly everybody in this room is going to have a different set of reasons, different goal, and success will look a little bit differently. Is there, like, let's just talk about like preparing to release your first project or whatever project. Is there a list of, like a checklist of things that, regardless of, the details of how, how success might look to you, what could that checklist be for just like, okay, here's what I need to have prepared. I need to be registered for a PRO. I need to have a bank account set up. I need, what are those things that are kind of a baseline that people should have prepared going into a first release?
Well, I would say the quality of your product is the first step.
Boom.
So it does cost money to like mix and master a song that's at the right quality for streaming, but you at least want to make sure that you're not just like uploading the roughest of demos, right? You want to make sure that it sounds good. So like make sure that the music itself is actually at the finished point. And yes, you do need a bank account, because you can, even if you don't upload through like indie distro for the DSPs, if you're putting something even on SoundCloud and I think YouTube, you can obviously find ways to monetize that. So you do want to make sure that you have all your back end set up. You want to make sure all your metadata is correct and that your name is spelled correctly. Be very cautious of using samples if you're in that space on production, because if you release something commercially and you didn't clear a sample, you could easily get sued or just have your music taken down. So just be very, organized to that end. And yes, PRO registration is important because you don't want people to steal your copyright or you lose out on money at the end of the day. I think that's the other part of it, because there is a way for you, as Adam says, like, even if you're not necessarily, selling out an arena day one, you're definitely going to be able to monetize your art much faster than if you had to go through like a major label. So, yeah, that was kind of a scattered response. Sorry. I am like high on Pamela's pancakes right now.
Yeah.
So,
and some
we're
Swedish
vibing
place
today.
last night too that was really good.
We're just vibing on Pittsburgh food up here. Sorry,
people know
just had to
eating sandwiches and stuff.
Had to issue the disclaimer.
I'll speak to like the creative side, because I think like for me that I'm very I'm upfront. I'm generally the first person at the label to talk to the artist once the music comes in. I start with story, like what is the project trying to say, and generally that's either written out with some sort of intent, or I do like an interview. I do a track by track with artists, right? Just to kind of write out like what does this mean? And I don't know if you guys, if you think visually, but generally mood board something out. Just get like a bunch of pictures and kind of put them in a thing. And I think that process of talking about the music and writing it down and really thinking back, because there are some artists that really come up with their visual language in the moment when they're in the studio. And then there are other artists that have to kind of like draw meaning from it over time, through talking about it. I know so many artists who they get 6 months into to an album and they've talked about it a lot and they finally know what it's about, So depending on who you are and what you do, capturing that, I think, the other thing that I think about is are there 20 people in the world, or 20 artists, or 20 people on Instagram or TikTok that you think might like your music, and not necessarily to like reach out to them, but just to get a sense of what you're working with, and to really interrogate yourself to like, what is the meaning behind this? And I generally put that into like a brief that says something, and with that, I think visual presentation is extremely important in this day and age, because that is the front line of how you present music. And so a strong visual presentation. I think if you're up and coming artists, you'll find a lot of favors out there with people that just want to work, people that I've seen so many times where like a like a really strong art director will just work with someone because they fuck with their music, and you'll find those kind of things much quicker. And so I think if you're able, to find someone to partner with to create the visual storytelling, unless you do it yourself, that is really important, I think, to like, I know for me, when I'm looking at artists, I don't care about numbers and stuff, but I care about like the world that they're presenting. I care about the visual language. I care about their story, because I think those artists tend to be the ones that have a real command of their craft and a command of the audience they're trying to reach. And I think every artist has this. It's just the challenge from I'm making my record and I'm recording to I have to kind of present it to the world, But I think mood boarding and just sitting there or talking with a friend or whatever and getting it down is a very important thing to really understand what your story is. And I think once you have that, then how you present it visually. And when I said, like, you have all access to the same tools that I do, I mean, it's really true. I mean, CapCut you can work with to create short form. I don't think music videos have a ton of utility anymore. If you look at
Don't tell any of my clients.
Well, this is the problem. We're still stuck in that mode. People want it, so we still. I'm sure Fab and I still go through the process, but short form stuff. We can go into like the details of short form and kind of what works, but really what does not work right now on TikTok, and I've seen this, we've tested it, highly polished content does not work. The like raw stuff works because, I'm being recorded. The great people at Facebook and wonderful people that I adore at TikTok, they're capitalists, and they want people to spend money for the polished advertising shit. It does not reward stuff that feels like advertising. So that's why I'm saying, like, you guys have the same tools that I have too, because I'm about to shoot like a bunch of artists on Monday. I'm doing it all on an iPhone because that stuff just algorithmically works better. So, you can also just fucking hop on ChatGPT and be like, hey, how do the algorithms work and blah, blah, blah. Like, AI is kind of the third rail, but in terms of brainstorming and concepting, there are great tools out there to help you kind of develop your visual language that I use every day and are free to you guys. But I think coming up with a visual brief, a creative brief, really helps you. I love when an artist comes to me and presents that world conceptually. It's what everyone's kind of looking for in terms of the cohesiveness of presenting an entire world. And if you're not inclined to do that or not a visual person, find someone that loves your shit. I mean, that might help you out. You know what I mean? And I know that's kind of an overly simplistic thing from a label guy that has a lot of budgets to do shit. But I'm also here. I'm part of the Rising Artist Foundation, so you're always welcome to hit me up. My DMs are open for people to just hit me up. I'll point you in the direction of places like that. But visual presentation, I think, is incredibly important these days in getting noticed. And
making sure that once that's all done and dusted, that you've got it consistent across everywhere you exist in the digital space. So like your Spotify profile should match what's going on in your Meta Instagram world profile, and avatar photo and logo. You just want to make sure it's consistent. So there's just constant recognition across people as they discover you.
And then also, I love that you mentioned Discord, but then also pick again, there are plenty of big artists right now that don't do social media and stuff, and it's plenty of success. But if you are wanting to do that, pick a platform that you really think is attuned to your style and presentation. And I always say just focus on one. Just be really good on one if you feel like you're really going to be good on one, because they operate different. TikTok's entirely different than Instagram. Instagram's entirely different than Discord and everything. And there are different ways of doing it. We can go into kind of the peculiarities of that, but don't try and do them all really well, because that's very challenging to do, I think.
There are only so many hours in the day.
And just the storytelling you might want to do. If you're more creative and visual, Instagram is great for that. If you're more the kind of person that likes to wake up and tell the world what you wrote about, TikTok is there. If you like bringing people into your world of beat making and record making, live streams on Twitch and YouTube can do. But you have to realize, again, this is the bad part, there are hundreds of thousands of people doing that every day as well, So how do you make yourself distinct? What's your angle on it going to be to tell a unique story to an audience?
Yeah. So once you have a kind of visual world, or just sort of the world of this project built out, and you kind of think about which platforms will help you accomplish that communication. How do you think about structuring a content plan or just any sort of like plan of release of assets before and after the actual project comes out?
Talk about social calendars and shit.
Yeah, I think it's like you set a release date. And apologies if some people already know this in the audience, but you set your release date and then you work backwards from that. So like at minimum, you can, again, if we're just talking, if you're fully independent and you're just putting your stuff out through TuneCore or whatever, you can likely ingest something. I think it takes 48 hours to get something ingested to like social media and DSPs. But if you want to kind of figure out a way to give that release room for discovery and any sort of editorial support, and by that it's like playlisting and such on Spotify, you want to at least give yourself a 3-week runway from when that audio hits those platforms, so to the release date. So it's like kind of working backwards from that. And then like the sooner you ingest a sound to like a TikTok, right? Like a lot of people are less gatekeepy, even the majors now, with snippets and sounds getting leaked on TikTok, right? Because you want there to be kind of this natural discovery and build into the release. Whereas like back in my day, when people bought albums, they didn't have anything beyond the single that was at radio or the music video that was on MTV, and you had to buy the album, and then you had to live with the album for like months, right? And now it's the other way around, where you have to do all this build, because by the time the music's out, they're on to the next, like by the next week. And I think that's what you'll see is like you kind of have to plan it out in a way where maybe you're not dropping an entire project, maybe you're setting a succession of, I'm so visual with my hands today, but basically it's like a single, and then you're like, okay, and then in 6 weeks or 8 weeks after that, I have another song ready to go, and like this content, like you're mapping out the story and where that will live, and making sure again that you've got it organized in a way that the sound or the music or the single, all that is ingested in time, because everything we're doing now is digital anyway. And then if it's in a bigger format, like you actually want to do physical, then you need like 6 months at minimum to get like a vinyl pressing made, which can be pricey. And most of the times you would do that in partnership with a label or major distro scenario. Sorry, is that answering the question?
Yeah, I think if you are going to do social media, again, I'm not, I don't want to be people up here saying like you have to do that, because it's not like but if you're going to do it, I think consistency is pretty important, and making sure, the algorithms, again, we're like the good news, bad news, the good news is there are less gatekeepers. The problem now is our gatekeepers are like these algorithms that kind of like define and control our destiny to some degree once you start doing it, right? But the algorithms will not impact your ability to have a relationship with a small group of people and affect them. The algorithms generally affect your reach. But in terms of nurturing a fan base, I think consistency is really important. And kind of giving people something, if you've got 10 people on a broadcast channel on Instagram, you're doing great, like talk to those 10 people, they'll tell 10 other people, but consistency is really important. And I think once you get past your release date, I always feel like that is just the beginning of your storytelling, really, like you have to keep on figuring out ways to point back to your songs and keep it alive, because again, the more you're in, the more you have the chance of things to be discovered. And the crazy thing about these days is there's no real such thing as catalog, because everything's new and everything's searchable and everything's available at any given moment. So even that will provide some discovery if you have other songs there, and those songs might go. So it is a lot of work. We do put more on the artist these days than we ever have in terms of creation of ideas and maintaining an audience, fan engagement. But if you're into that, there's a lot of creativity and a lot of opportunity, and you are completely in control of telling your story, which I think is a wonderful thing. It's very empowering.
So if you say you have those 10 people in your whatever group you're able to, whether that's Discord or the Instagram broadcast channel, whatever, is that different than if you're literally about to put out your first song and there's nobody? Like what do you do if just for your first thing? Should I just put out an album and then build from there and just start storytelling after that? So there's something to point back to? Or, if there's no momentum yet, where do we start?
I think you have to put something out into the world. And
Totally.
I don't think it has to be an 18-song album and then a 3-song re-release deluxe. Like, you literally can just song to song it, and each consider it more of like a chapter, right? Like, each song or EP or something to that end it's like you're breadcrumbing your story into the world. You're making sure that your content is consistent. And again, it does take an investment, financially, time-wise, all of that. But like, there are ways to find an audience, and there are algorithms that do support people to a certain, even if you get like one like or one comment on a TikTok and you engage with that person, I think that's you just got to start. And putting it all out and then waiting for people to show up, you just have to keep working it and working it and working it, and then taking it into the IRL space and trying to, get yourself involved maybe with other artists or something to that end, trying to perform at local showcases wherever you may be based, get on maybe like as an opening act somewhere with a band that's coming into town, especially places like Pittsburgh specifically.
Totally.
A lot of the times, some artists who are on the road aren't necessarily looking to have one act with them across the tour, so they may talk to the local promoter, the local venue owner, and say like, oh, who are some people that are, really great, or can get some people to come out, or just people we should be checking out. Like, there's still some of that, I think, organic discovery that can happen as well. Sorry, I jumped into live, but like,
Well, live is the next thing. Yeah,
it's
I
all
think it goes
important.
back to the develop a list of 20 people or artists or whatever that might be into what you're doing. Because again, that's going to help you define your audience a little bit more by defining who you think will like your music.
Yeah. Fab, how do you think about releases holistically with touring and with merch and things like that? Like, how do you kind of shape that sort of 360 plan?
Yeah, I think the types of clients that I look after are very multifaceted in their discipline as a musician. So, there is no world where it's just we're putting out music and we're not touring, or there's no merch, because every single part of that is the story that Adam references. So it's we're putting out music. We're also routing a tour. We're working. My artists work with booking agents, and so I'm in tandem with those team members, probably a year out from when we know the album's going to drop, because you got to route a tour. You got to get merch designs, but the merch designs don't really come into play until you've got your visual narrative locked, and that usually starts with, what's your album cover look like? What's your logo look like? All of those pieces of the visual part of this whole chapter of music. So then you got to find a merch company that can distro for you, manufacture and put out the product for you. So yeah, I am approaching all those bits and pieces, and like, you have to be mindful, at least as a manager, you have to be mindful of all of the turnaround time to get everything delivered within a certain time frame, leading up to whatever that release date is. So it's like, okay, if I want to have like this many t-shirts and hoodies, then I'm going to need at least 4 weeks to submit those designs, and then, so on and so forth. It's a bit vague, but yeah, like I said, there's a lot of pressure on artists now to be, you're just like the CEO of like an empire. And like, there are some artists that can get away with just putting out music and kind of chilling, and their streams are great and they can make money that way. And then you have other artists that are like, no, I'm happiest when I'm out live and I'm selling the merch, because that's really what supports tours nowadays, because touring is so expensive. So it's all just ways for you not only to share your art, but also to hopefully at some point make a return on your investment, make some money. So, yeah.
And we've also talked about, we touched on choosing kind of what platform or whatever works for you. How do you what if you decide, okay, I don't want my music on streaming, or like I want to put my music out on non-traditional, I mean, I guess however you define non-traditional, but say, okay, no streaming, I want to put it on Bandcamp, or I want to do something, completely offline. How do you think about that in terms of communication? How do you push that? What do you do with non-traditional?
I don't. I feel like a lot of artists that are just getting started, it's an unfortunate thing, but it's the nature of the beast. I haven't experienced a scenario where if you're just getting started, you can somehow do it without having to play ball with some of the major DSPs. I think a lot of the artists that do make that stance, unfortunately, at one point did have their music. Yeah, they're making the money and they have the fan base. I think it's much harder to reach an audience nowadays if you're not present on the digital streaming platforms. I just don't think.
Or you figure out an angle to tell your story of why that's important to you. You know what I mean? You make that part of your story.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
I don't have experience in it though. And don't get me wrong. Everybody's frustrated with the fact that you gotta deal with some of the politics of releasing your music on these platforms. But everybody knows it's you gotta play the game a little bit.
And there are new services. There's the one it's kind of a streaming service. It's something.
See, you don't even know what it's called.
It's something project. What is it called? Someone tell me what it is. Hold on, I have it on my phone here.
Is anybody in the audience?
Wait, it's
Subvert? What?
No, Nina Project. Do you guys use that? Yeah, I think it's a great new streaming platform where it is about the artist, and it's kind of I know for younger audiences, it's really used as discovery, and it's more community based, and it's not owned by a big thing. But I know a lot of people are, and it's similar to Bandcamp as well, kind of outside the system and using it. So, and I know I find a lot of stuff there that's quite interesting, even though I can't remember what the name is, but I know where it is on my phone. But Nina Project, an interesting new discovery thing where you're not going to be competing against, fucking Tame Impala and shit for attention.
I'll have to sidebar with you on that. I was not aware.
Yeah,
the game.
Nina Project.
So okay, if you decide to, you do think that it's important for young artists to just be on streaming until there's enough of a following to.
Absolutely, especially if you're not if you're just self-releasing and you picking up some streams month after month, that's profitable for you at the end of the day because you own your master.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
And then what about, so if you're pressing a small run of CDs or there's a local vinyl pressing plant here that can do small quantities for pretty cheap, how do you price those things and how do you factor that into it? Some questions came in about.
Here's what I would say: do merch first.
Before a physical release.
Physical is merch. That's how I think.
Yeah,
of it.
yeah. You can do both. It's just there's a process and the expense of going through a physical thing. You have to get you have to get a lacquer cut. You have to get it mastered a certain way. There's lead times. It's expensive to ship. I definitely think vinyl, if you could do 500 copies or something like that, there are also places where you can do it kind of on consignment, pay as you go. But I think merch is a really important thing in terms of getting your brand out there. Just if you have one thing to make first, I think that's the quickest turn, I think the highest ROI, and people tend to do that stuff. I think that in terms of, what was your question?
Yeah, just how do you price stuff?
Price point. You have to price competitively. You can't, because it costs so much to create
especially
physical.
the lower run. I just go around and look and see what other young artists are doing.
I think retail for vinyl is average is $20 or something like that.
In a shop these days, $25 for a single LP. It just really also depends on the kind of stuff you do. Again, if it's part of your brand that you want to present a real artistic thing, then throw down and make it special. And there's this rapper Makami, and he built a brand just on insane vinyl formats, and now his shit goes for $3,000, $4,000. But his whole thing was, I'm going to make really rare. Part of his story was, I'm going to make really rare, limited run, exceptionally designed product, and that was part of his story that he wanted to get across. So different strokes for different folks, but yeah, vinyl is it's expensive, it's laborious, it's going to take you 4 or 5 months to turn around, and I would make sure you have an audience for it first, because it will be sitting in your garage for a long time, if not.
Some of the artists out here right now, they've kind of put different things up on some on SoundCloud, some on YouTube, just kind of all over the place. But now, the thought is, okay, I want to do something more intentional with this next release. I want to kind of like bring it all into a narrative, kind of clean it up. How do you kind of tie everything that's out there already and present it more intentionally?
Oh, that's already out there.
If just like random shit's on, or random stuff is on SoundCloud, or just kind of all over the internet,
Well, the good thing is you could do like another release if people, you could have different campaigns. I mean, what's really interesting right now about what we see is that because there is no such thing as catalog, everything is fresh and new. We're seeing songs that
what do
are
you
10
mean by
years
that?
old.
It's kind of like when somebody puts out a new, because of streaming, like if you hear a new song and you go to that person's album or profile, and then you start listening to their other stuff. So it's like when you put out new music, the old stuff also sees a boost, right? So like this idea of catalog is like, again, going back into the ice ages of the music industry. You didn't go to the store and buy all the old albums. You just bought the one that you know the song to, and now people are discovering. So there is no idea. Catalog has this connotation of like it's back, it's in the basement somewhere, and nobody really knows about that anymore. It's a free market when it comes to music discovery.
I mean, it's songs from 10 years ago have a stronger likelihood sometimes of breaking than your newest song.
Yeah,
because you never know why.
Didn't Doechie's Anxiety, that song is old. That's like 2 years old or something like that.
Yeah,
and now it's like up for like record of the year.
Yeah.
2-3 years old.
Yeah, because I think she did like a reissue of it, and they kind of gamed the system to get a new thing. Yeah.
So and that could be considered a catalog record.
I think you should just be working everything that you have at like call back to it, and because it's all available. Like if you have an idea around a song that you came up 5 years ago, don't worry about it because it came up 5 years ago. No one was paying attention 5 years ago. You can do a thing around it now, or if there's a song that connects to some contemporaneous event or something, that's the wonderful thing about the flexibility of digital, is that you can focus on things quite easily. You on YouTube, a very simple thing to do is you switch out the poster image that lands on it. That will re-hit the YouTube algorithm again, so it will start presenting it to more people. And that's a quick way of, if you have a lot of videos up on YouTube, just go refresh all the poster images, and you will get some algorithmic benefit to that.
And just to maybe pull it back to like the initial question, if you have sort of this scattered presence musically online, put it this way. I have an artist client that had put out some stuff before we started working together that really wasn't representative of who she was trying to be as a solo artist. But it was like, I just put out this song, or I just put out this video, and we wiped it because I was like, you're not in love with this music. It hasn't really gained much traction. It doesn't seem to be doing much for you. So let's just like clean the slate a bit and put out something now that's a bit more intentional, consistent, and then have that live across all. So it's more of, you can also do a cleanup. If you're like, okay, I got this one thing on Bandcamp that nobody cares about that I'm kind of over because that's 2 years old, and I think I've changed my sound or I've evolved as an artist. You just want to make sure you're constantly checking in with yourself as an artist, and not just like beating a dead horse for something that isn't speaking to you in this moment, and how people can continue to discover you and spread the word about what it is that what you're putting out.
Your specific question, there's other things you can do if you have a lot of stuff up. There's on Spotify, there are these things called thematic album compilations where you can go back and compile songs into something and have Spotify will treat it as a new release, so you get all the algorithmic benefits of that. You can go to YouTube and create your own playlists and albums. You can create playlists on things. I mean, if you do have a body of work out there, there's a lot you can play with in terms of the tools that are offered to present it in a fresh, new way to your audience that are pretty effective. Because again, if you recompile it, the algorithm thinks it's new, or treats it at least as new, and that's unfortunately what is more beneficial. It still treats new as the thing.
One of the grantees was.
And if anyone has questions about those things, I can just hit me up and I'll tell you how to do them.
Cool. One of the grantees was specifically asked about that of like, okay, I don't really identify with the music that I made
Take it down.
before. Should I keep it up? Should I take it down? Your vote is for.
Well, I
ditch
think
it?
I'm talking in terms of the like secondary and tertiary DSPs, right? Like I'm talking about like if you've got stuff living on YouTube or SoundCloud, you can probably archive that. If you've got something that's living on like a Spotify or an Apple Music or something to that end, I don't know. Like I guess if it's not even generating anything, pull it. Otherwise, you just want to have that. That can get pushed down with new releases and things of that nature. So you can kind of clean it in that way. But I'm also a fan of just like be who you want to be and take away the stuff that doesn't resonate.
Yeah, if it's not part of the story you're trying to tell now, and it's going to create some cognitive dissonance, then you have to think about that.
Cool. So let's talk about like PR and marketing. How do you outline? Well, first of all,
Be careful.
We're laughing
Fab.
because at another panel I did with Ben, I was like, nobody should pay for publicity.
Yeah.
Apparently that's like a soundbite on TikTok.
Let's run that
now.
back. So
The wrong way to go
Fab,
viral.
you were of the mindset that don't put your money into
No, that wasn't the mindset at all. I'm here to clear the air on
PR.
that.
Okay, clear the air.
So my prior thought about, I think editorial, like print editorial and media has shifted so much in the last decade. And then since COVID, like you've seen a lot of magazines shut down, outlets shut down, blog culture has completely shifted. I think we've moved into this place now where podcasts and Substacks are kind of becoming king, and like you find more non-traditional press opportunities that are more impactful for promoting your voice, so to speak, than shelling out a lot of cash up front for somebody to kind of knock on doors. But I almost feel like publicity
Just send emails out.
Yeah, like publicity is, I look at publicity as a gas on something that's already, a fire that's already started.
Totally.
And like, I think there's this misconception that, well, if I hire a publicist, then, they'll get me a magazine cover and then everyone's going to buy my album. And like those things don't necessarily always connect.
Preach.
So it's more about investing. If you've got a little bit of cash, invest in your content, invest in somebody who can help you create this visual narrative, invest in somebody that understands how to be chronically online and like work with you on your social presence. And like, not necessarily, not everybody wants to be doing like trends on TikTok all day, but you might have somebody that might be versatile at CapCut and can help cut your shit up for you. And then you've got like a stash. I think it's like investing in that more than anything. And then, finding your way to publicity eventually, like maybe closer to and around an actual release. That's kind of what I was saying. I think people think like, let me just go to publicist and like all my problems will be solved.
And it's remarkable how much publicists have not yet keyed into this new world of attention getting, you know what I mean?
Well, they have, because I just had that actually. I had a PR team, not that I work with, but that was doing a campaign, and they were like, we're going to pitch to these Substack writers. And I was like, genius.
Fresh idea.
And then you have these like TikTok influencers, like the guy on the street that's like, hey, let me see your house. Like there's all these non-traditional ways of how people can find you that is considered press.
And the interesting thing about that is the utility of it. Even if it's small, you can go do that and then you do your own clip farming and then put it up on all your socials and then tell your story to your fans.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I thought the publicists, at least like, in my experience recently, like publicists kind of see this sort of like, person on the street or the podcast thing, and they're like, actually that's marketing, not press, so we don't really touch that.
And that will be their downfall.
Exactly. I mean, it's great.
Yeah.
Writing their own like
Yeah. So okay, I guess
I think it's just you want to work with a publicist that's
That
thinking
understands
outside
that
the
it
box.
is-
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely, 100%.
And I think with most of these kind of like, person on the street kind of things, like a lot of their inputs they're getting the people that they're following are people that they like, and it's coming. They're kind of outside of the publicity. Like, I think the frustration with the publicists is that they don't have a lock on that in the way that they might have the lock on like a New York Times, where they control they can gatekeep
The relationship.
Yeah,
for sure.
you hop into their DMs. If they like it, then you do it. And again, you can just start small. If it's a local Pittsburgh thing that you can get on, just get on it, clip farm, tell your story, and tell it to your
Yeah,
fans.
because I think traditional press, especially when you're starting out, you're needing that to just sort of build your sheet, like pull quotes, like just the Pittsburgh Times said this about me, check me out. It's more about adding to just
Something to point to.
the profile. Yeah.
All right, last question before we move into a Q&A.
I believe it's called the Pittsburgh Gazette. Am I correct on that?
My
Post-Gazette.
apologies.
The
Is it the
Pittsburgh
Gazette? See, look, Pennsylvania boy.
That's going to be another thing. I'd be like, Fat Leys misrepresents the
She doesn't even the
Pittsburghian.
local newspaper.
Okay, so if a publicist, may or may not be worth it, are there other marketing services that you
Hell
can
yeah.
hire that might be worth it? Like, what are they, and how do you assess how worth it they are?
I'm starting to feel like some of those companies are taking your money too.
Yes, yeah. I mean,
There's all these
influencers.
like social media companies.
Influencers
out
aren't going to
there.
work for you. The social company, they're just going to say, what's your story? And then they're going to ask you for a bunch of content, and then maybe they'll get it around. I think the most valuable thing to do, so if you have a budget, right? If you're going to spend $2,000 a month on a publicist or something like that, find a person near you that you like their visuals and can be your content person. Just hire a content person to partner with you. I think that's the best in terms of telling your story. And whatever it is, short form, long form, photography, whatever. I think that's the best. In terms of me now, when I put together teams, that's the number one person I'm looking for, is a person that can help tell the story visually for an artist and can be locked in with them over a period of time, because again, it takes a while. The storytelling starts when you drop your first song. It does not end when you put out the record. I mean, we talk a lot at our label about artist cycles versus album cycles. And as long as there's an artist engaged, we're engaged, and they're engaged with their fans. And it takes that kind of repetitive, ongoing storytelling. So that's where I would prioritize my investment if I was going to invest in my own career.
Cool.
I agree.
Should we open it up to some questions?
Yo.
Pass the
How's everyone
mic.
feeling out there? Are we being helpful?
We good, guys?
Yes, we can open up for questions now. I also
I guess
just
just
want
tell
to
us
shout
now.
out really quickly that Ben had mentioned a local press. It's called Hellbender Vinyl. They're just over here in Lawrenceville. They're really cool. They do tours. Mike takes you out for a beer afterwards if you want on the Thursday at 2:30. And they have some gear over there, but they can do really short, like really small presses and like a lot of different things. They're a great resource, and they can work with different budgets. But
Yeah, if you can find a local press, that's
Yeah.
the best, because they have the whole from lacquers to then you don't have to pay to ship all the vinyl to you, and I think it's always great with everything that you can do. Also, I would say, if you can support local vendors and stuff, because they're going to be incentivized to your stories. So local merch companies, local artists, local designers, whatever you can do. I think that to me has always been much more fruitful.
questions? Anyone have any questions out here? Yes, here we are.
Hi. My question is around record labels and like what, like I think self-releasing music, I totally understand, but like when you're ready to take it to the next level, what are the expectations of record labels anymore of artists? And what is the way that you would approach or find the right record label for you?
It's a great question. I'm not talking about my record label, Loma Vista Recordings. I would say the problem right now with the record labels is that they want to see something that's already moving, unfortunately. For most of them. I think they're smaller record labels. I think on the smaller side, what most independent record labels represent nowadays is a community of like-minded artists. So I think in terms of you looking for, who are the artists that you look up to, where are they putting out their music and stuff like that. I think the value of a record label these days, obviously it's there's a financial thing to it, which always helps. Record labels aren't going to have that much money to put in, so it's not like the game changing, unless you're doing like, 200 million streams on a song or something like that, the deals are not going to be, they do crazy deals for that kind of shit. But again, that's just algorithmic, algo A&R, which kind of sucks. But I think, if you find the right home, I think for an independent, when you've already done it yourself a little bit, I think that's great knowledge for you to understand what you truly need from a record label. What are your shortcomings? What are the things? How can we do? When we structure a deal, we always look at the shared goals that we have and structure a deal around that. Where we spend money, you might need an advance to do certain things, to tour and stuff like that, to pay off recording bills. You might say, oh, actually, I've got that. I've got a home studio. It costs me nothing to make a record. Put more money into to marketing and promoting my thing. But I think really, self-releasing gives you the ability to really understand what you need, and then also understand how to hold the label accountable to what you want from them. I always think, if you can self-release and do it your own until you hit a wall, I think that's always, in this day and age, that's how you're going to have more leverage down the road in terms of optimizing your deal and stuff like that. But we always look, when we sign an artist, I'm always looking for someone that has a point of view, someone that has an intention behind their music, what they're trying to say, and they have a vision for what they're saying. My partner signed Tupac Shakur at the label back in the day, and he said the first time he sat down with Tupac before he was dancing in Digital Underground and stuff, he knew exactly what he wanted to do and the impact in the world he wanted to have. He wanted to represent and tell a story about what it meant to be a young black man in America. And you think about the through line of Tupac through the whole thing, that's what he did. And I think artists, and then again, that's why I go back to the story. If you can sit down with a label and say, this is what I want, this is what I want to do, you can help me, I love that, because that shows that you have energy and drive. I think the days of going to a label and just being like, here I am, do the shit and do your magic, it just doesn't exist anymore. They don't have the capabilities, for all the reasons that we've been talking about, to press a button or have leverage in the marketplace or access to the marketplace in a different way than you do. So I think it's really important to know what you want, know your purpose, have a vision for what you want to do, and that makes you very appealing to a record label where you can sit down and present to them, this is how I want it to be, can you help me? It's kind of inverted a little bit these days, it's less of what can you do for me, but it's almost like as an artist, what can I do for you as a record label, and then you guys add on to it.
And also just be careful of what you're giving in a deal. So the one thing to be mindful of, whether they're
manager versus label,
tiny or major, there's always turnover at these companies. And so if you get brought in and you're like regaled by this wonderful creative director with very cool shoes, and then 6 months he's not at the company anymore, and then you kind of have to start over. And sometimes I've been in that position where you kind of have to reprove to the new regime why you're a valuable asset to the label. And so I think my point to that is just be conscious of like how long you do deals for, how many albums, what that entails. Be very objective and smart about how you conduct your partnerships and how much you give up.
Yeah, and if you don't want to give away, more rights or longer term deals, you can go to an AWOL or an Orchard and do a very short term deal with them. They'll give you marketing money.
Those are distributors, by the way.
Yeah, distributors. There's so many options to you as an artist. That and the interesting thing about like the AWOLs and Orchards and stuff like that, United Masters, is that as they can scale with you really well. So if something starts popping off, then they have digital services, they have international marketing, they can scale with you very well. But you still need to have that spark. You have to have something going on for them to engage. But that's called label services, or the general thing. It's not really a record label because they don't know the rights. They do 3-year deals. They give you marketing money. And then they have control of the record until they recoup their marketing money. So it's a little bit different of a nature of a deal, but they do have great services. They do great work, and Virgin does it too. All the majors kind of have that now built in. And then, they're the indies, like the Merges and Secretly Canadians and stuff like that are kind of like on the mid-tier and are wonderful, very artist-centric and focused, but in my opinion, they have kind of a ceiling in terms of what they can do. And then they're just small indies, where you're like really a partner with them, and generally those are like 50-50 deals. You maintain the rights to your music, and very artist friendly. And like I said before, more community driven if that's a requirement for you, if you want to be part of a community of artists, like-minded. Lots of options.
We had a session on record labels before, so that'll also be up online to hear more about that. We have a question up here.
Hello. In both previous panels and in this one, people have talked about distros, but never really explained the more like nitty gritty of like, what do I need to do? How do I contact a distro to help get my music out, right? If I'm self-publishing, if I'm putting, second, third album out, what have you, like what do I need to prove that I can write music, it's good, and I can put it out? Like, what kind of formats do I need to look at? Like, how do I have it mastered? I was hoping that y'all could kind of expound on like more of the back end of that.
Well, I guess, do you have a lawyer?
No, but I can get one.
No, I just meant in terms of like, you can get in touch with any of these distro. I mean, I'm sure they have like basic contact us, get in touch type contact info. I obviously have in the industry, it's not that big of an industry. Everybody kind of knows each other. So if you have a lawyer or a manager or somebody that can reach out to some of these folks and get in touch with like an A&R that works at an AWOL, there are definitely ways that you can master your own music. It's not necessarily recommended. It can be very time consuming, but there are mastering houses that you can get in touch with as far as like uploading your music to them, and they can get you the 24-bit WAV file and stuff of that nature at a cost. There are some places that can do it for just a few $100, for a release. Mixing is something that's a bit more nuanced. That's the step before master, and that's just somebody coming in and fine-tuning all of the stems and the parts of the song. And I don't know how involved you are in general with like the production of the music, but you want to make sure the mix, or at least the files, are organized so that when you submit it for mastering, it's done, it's dusted, they get you back your files in time. And then from there, again, you would, like TuneCore, you just set up an account online and release it through that. But if you want to get more of like a, white glove thing, it's about getting in touch with some of the in-house A&R / creative folks that work within those companies. So that's like a networking thing, and you can probably do that through a manager, a lawyer, even your PRO. Even if you're with ASCAP and you reach out to one of the creative executives at ASCAP, they may say, hey, I'm just trying to get in touch with somebody at this, and they can probably connect you. I think the network is closer to you than you might think. And sometimes you just got to do some outreach and self-promotion. I don't know if that's the right.
Are you talking like what level? Regardless of that, though, even if you get in touch, it depends on the help that you need. And I'm trying to, I guess, if you're helping more on the process of it, like the technical aspects of it, or are you talking about actually successful distribution?
I guess both, because as I said, like it's been kind of touched on. You talked about it a little bit earlier, but never so much the like, what do I need to do? How do I use these folks to successfully distribute my music in a way that I personally cannot? Like, how do I get it in front of more people? Whether that's by streaming or by physical.
You might hate this answer. Even if you get in touch with those people and they give you everything that you do.
I'm not saying anything because I'm being filmed.
If you can't build an audience, you're in the same place.
It's the same, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the cavalry's not coming anymore. And like I said, we don't have the, 20 years ago, I could call Amy at MTV and say, hey, put Vampire Weekend on your thing and blah, 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 and you can blow up fucking Vampire Weekend, right? I just don't have that. So I'm in the same position as you are in terms of like, how do I go and how do I build a fan base one by one, brick by brick? And then you'll get noticed if you do that successfully. And I know it's I hope that's not I hope that doesn't feel negative. I want that for all you guys to feel quite empowering, that you do not need us anymore. And so many artists, you get in a position where it's like, oh God, like a year ago we were talking to them and then they have a successful thing. And then a year later we're talking to them and they're like, guess what? The deal just grew by 3 times. And I'm like, fuck, why did, because they did it all themselves, they built their audience. I think on the technical side of things, there are levels. If you're just talking like entry level thing, I mean, CD Baby has a ton of resources for you on mastering and DistroKid. They have deals with places. It sounds like this pressing plan but in terms of like mastering houses where you can just like upload files and they kind of do it for you. There's a lot of those kind of DIY kind of resources that are I think. But when we're talking here about audience building and engagement and development. A lot of that, I mean, even with the labels now, it's just like they don't, big labels, they say we can't do 0 to 60 anymore. We can do 60 to 100 in terms of like miles per hour or whatever percentage of growth. I think a good manager or someone who understands what you want to do is a good thing.
I'm just going to interrupt you because your Uber is here in a minute and a half.
It's only me now. Now you guys just got to listen to me for the next little bit.
No, but I was just going to add one more point to that. I had an artist that I managed who had a top 10 hit at Alternative and like was signed to a major. And then his profile started to be on the decline. And so we did a deal with an indie distributor who shall remain nameless, but pretty reputable. And, they were able to give some budget and things of that nature. But then when it got into the weeds of releasing music, it was not a very pleasant experience. So we might as well have just did it ourselves. So I think that's what Adam's point is. It is very subjective, the experience that you'll have. But access to those things sometimes isn't as difficult as you might think. Yeah.
Well, just to kind of
you guys are so amazing.
Yeah,
Thank you for
thank you,
having me.
I have a safe
I'm gonna
flight.
sneak out.
While they say their goodbyes, is there another?
Wait, sorry. Just to go into that a little bit more. The distro services that you can just upload your music to, with a DistroKid, TuneCore, whatever, versus the distributors like AWOL or the Orchard or whatever. Do you see any difference between?
Oh, totally, yeah. I mean, DistroKid is meant for people that can truly. They don't have a lot of services around it, right? So they don't have they don't have digital marketing services they can apply to and stuff like that. So I think if you look out on a continuum, you've got the CD Babies, DistroKid stems that are like completely DIY. DistroKid, you give them $25 for the year and you can upload as much music as you want and it's there. Everything else is up to you. On the label services side, like AWOL, there is a level of A&R and curation that they do. They're more open because those label services are trying to do like a volume thing. So the more releases that they have, the better off that they're going to be. And then you have like the record labels, and if you think about it, and I don't mean to be like nerdy about it, but it is fundamentally kind of for the big labels like a venture capital game, right? They're assessing risk and they're assessing opportunity. If they have an artist that has 500,000 people on Instagram and 2 million people on TikTok, their risk is lower. And that's the game that they're playing at the major. It's all just risk, asset management. They look at things very from a quant perspective. So to even think about those things, you have to have a lot of movement. They're not gonna take a flyer like they used to, where it's like, oh, I saw this, My Chemical Romance playing in a bar in New Jersey and let's sign them because they're going to change the world. Like that just, I don't hear any of those stories anymore. They get on things that are moving. So I think in terms of a continuum, getting your music on, like going with like DistroKid or something like that, just to get your music up, you'll learn a lot, and like I said to this woman, like you'll learn a lot about what you need in that, just getting your music up, I mean, there's more to it, and I can go into it, but I think for anyone starting out, think about, again, I just go back to story and your audience that you want to engage and how you're telling your story. And if you do that and you're really happy with that, then you're successful in that first little bit, and then you can add on to that in terms of the complexity and the sophistication of telling your story.
There we are. Another question over here.
Thanks for this. I'm Dave.
Hey, Dave.
I used to keep like a contact list of press writers, 200 people, send out 200 emails every release, track the responses and all that stuff. I was wondering if you had a sense, given the changing nature of publications, Substacks and all this stuff, of what people are receptive to these days as far as music writers?
Oh God, I was talking to these guys yesterday, and this is, I mean, I don't want to paint as bleak of a picture, but I'm trying to paint a picture of reality and probably where we'll be, where we're progressive and going. I had a press release come over for a draft yesterday, and it was the first time I ever saw actual like engagement numbers for like posts and stuff in the press release. And I asked the publicist, I said, well, why do we have that? And he's like, that's what writers care about. They want to know that something is moving, that something has millions of streams on Spotify, you know? Like we were talking about this last night. We've moved into a world where 20 years ago or 25 years ago, a lot of stuff was driven by taste and people that just had taste and gatekeep. You know, I was listening to this thing, Judy Brown, the former editor at New Yorker, she was kind of talking about this, and she writes Substacks now and stuff because she likes the visceral, like immediate engagement. She's, I could move things, you know what I mean? Nowadays, all those people are just followers. You know, they follow things, and it kind of creates this like monoculture kind of sensibility where we're only paying attention to stuff that has heat and attraction to it rather than taste or quality. So again, I would go to, outside of those 20 trad writers, I would go to people that, you know, vlog and actually, because I think that's where the independent curation still exists, where they're not following because they're not, all those writers now are being judged on how many impressions their post gets and the reach of the social post that goes out. They're playing the quant game as much as the big guys and as much as the major labels. Everyone is playing this like they want to justify it quantifiably why they did it, because that is measurable rather than like, oh, this is really just dope, trust me, you know? And so I would flip that around and go to the people that actually are in the culture and in the actual conversation around music. You know, indie heads on Reddit's a great, you know, it's great if your stuff gets up there. You might get filleted, you might get a lot of praise, you know, but that, you know, that's art, right? You're you know, once it's out there, it's for people to kind of, you know, weigh in on and subjectively measure and talk about. But I think those kind of communities, Discord's an incredible community for conversation around, you know, certain kinds of music and stuff. If I were putting out music, and as we do, I'm more concerned with those kind of conversations and that kind of engagement than Pop Matters reviewing it and giving it a 7.1, you know? So I would rethink your list a little bit to who you're sending it to and see who are the people that are having those kind of conversations around kind of my music on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram and stuff like that.
As a music writer who gets a lot of things sent to me and asked for, I think the main thing, it definitely goes back to story. You would maybe want someone who isn't involved in the music to help write about what it is, or at least come up with an idea as to why it's important, because I think I get a lot of things sent to me like, it sounds like this, like all things that the band's gonna write about themselves. But if there's something else about it that can help me pitch as an angle of like, this is the reason why this is actually important to people that aren't in that band, that can help me think of an angle and a place that would help me pitch it, as opposed to just like, oh, it sounds like this and this was the last thing they did, which is like the first line of a Wikipedia entry, you know? So ask someone else what they might like about it that isn't in like that world, and frame the pitch that way. But I think hitting up like Reddit, like subreddits, is also kind of like see what happens, and that's another way of getting publication around it. But and hyperlinks, make sure that things are hyperlinked is also very important. So I'm not gonna go searching for things.
I think putting it up there and putting it on a subreddit that makes a lot of sense, and just saying, hey, what do you think about this? You know, there's a bravery to that. You know what I mean? I marvel at artists and the bravery that you guys have in terms of putting your art out there and subjecting it for criticism. But you might get an interesting insight that could be your lead. I mean, when I think about like, if you want to think about the formality of sending music out to those writers and stuff, I just always think the first paragraph is the most important thing. How can you draw people into the world? And when I was talking about, you know, coming up with your story and doing a track by track and mood boarding and stuff, I think that's a great way to get to that distillation. But I totally agree with Nerea. Like, find someone that you trust their opinion and have them say, this is what I'm feeling and this is what I'm hearing in it. Bouncing it off people is always a useful exercise in the early days, as you're just in your early stages of planning the creative and presentation around your record or your project.
Maybe someone on the subreddit will give you like the tagline, you know.
Absolutely.
Other questions? Oh, yes. Raise that more confidently. Okay.
Hi, my question is like, where would you find like the budget if you're not looking to go like the record label route yet, but you need to get a project released? And like, obviously there's a lot of fees that are involved in that. And I know like maybe I've is like what you use to like pay your living bills, but like I was just wondering if there is like any resources where like an independent artist could use to like find budget for releasing projects.
Rising Artist Foundation. You've done a lot of research here.
There's oh my God, what is it?
There's an organization called Beat Bread.
Oh yeah, so there are certain microloan companies like that. However, they're usually they're only gonna look at how much they can loan you based on your numbers that you already have, right? Which they're just tiny little bank loans basically. I mean, as is an advance, but
Yeah.
there are these companies, Beat Bread. There's like two others like it, and I'm forgetting their names. But if you have an established audience that regularly streams your music or things like that, then they will look at that and say, okay, based on these monthly numbers, we can lend you something. But again, that is something where, yet again, it's like things have to be moving already.
But Beat Bread, we had them last year, and I do think one thing that makes them a little bit different, or at least how they position themselves in this conversation, was that if you do have like 100 very dedicated fans they can see, as opposed to like you've been on Pool Party 2024 or whatever playlist once, like they say that their algorithm can see that, and so they can see like, oh, these people, this act has fans that like keep coming back to them. So the numbers, they say, have a little bit more like depth to like what the work you're doing on the back end, even if you don't have astronomical numbers on like Spotify or somewhere else. But there are a few places out there, but I think searching something like micro musicians might be helpful.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the point of on your end, trying to build an audience of 100 highly engaged people that you can actually do something with. I'll kind of turn it back on you a little bit. Like, do you have a sense of what you would need money for?
Like recording fees and like the distribution fees and like pretty much everything that goes into like getting into the studio to like actually make the record and then releasing it too. Like, let's say like you have like a song or whatever, but like you just need like budget for recording and releasing. Just like wondering like where those avenues are to like go about getting those that.
Do you know how you want to record? Like, do you have a sense of, do you need a studio, or can you, I think the first thing would be go through what you, like, how do you want to record? What's important to you? Is a studio important? Can you find someone, a producer that just might love what you do and say, okay, I'm just going to do this with you because I feel like you're incredible. And I'm going to support. That happens more than it doesn't happen. That even happens in the big levels, where producers just take a flyer. And again, I think I go back to the thing of find, I have themes here, but 20 people who you think will love your music. That could include producers, and maybe they will work with you and say, hey, look, let's make something great together because I'm inspired by you. You don't want to work with anyone who's not inspired by you. If you go in with money and say, I have $1,000 record, anyone's going to take your money. It doesn't mean it's going to be great. You want someone who believes in your music, believes in your vision. That's more important. And if you can find someone that believes in that, then maybe there's an opportunity to kind of to work something out with them, if they see your talent. I would say that with a lot of things is find the people that love your music and see what you can work through and see what people, because that happens more than it doesn't happen, where someone finds someone and says, oh, I'm gonna just, I believe in this and therefore I'm gonna put my time into it. And then in terms of the distribution and everything like that, again, I go back and like figure out how you want to do that. You know, how do you want to, because I think anyone, even if it's a friend or an uncle or whoever, I think understanding how you want to spend your money is more important, like the first step to figuring out what you need. And you know, there was a financial literacy thing earlier, just like, and I can help you, you know, with like just like budget line items and coming up with like a very trimmed down budget so that you know exactly how you're going to spend money. So I think it's that first, figure out the things that you need and how you want to spend money and how you want to record, and then that will tell you what money you actually need, because I think that's the most important thing, because you don't want to ask for too much or too little, because then, you know, if you have too little, you're going to come shy of your executing your vision. If you're too much, you're borrowing more than you need.
And I'll also add that I know that you've come to a few of these sessions. Like, there are people in this room who are great producers and recording engineers too. So definitely talk to these people. And there are also a lot of local resources. I know that what's his name, Herman Pearl Studio,
Pearl Arts.
Yeah, Pearl Arts. Well, you can, if you need to get into a studio. I think that there's some. He always makes room, from what I understand, for people without budgets. So like there's always like local opportunities and people to connect with to make that happen. And then if it is just a matter of like putting it up on CD Baby for $20 or whatever, like.
And I would focus on that first. Make the best recording that you are able to make at this given moment in your career, you know? And then once you have that, you'll understand, okay, this is what I need to do to promote it and market it and my needs. But focus first on making the great music.
More questions? Any other?
So it's so easy for anyone to, you know, put their music online, but the double-edged sword is that you kind of have to play the algorithm game, especially if you're, you know, like we were talking about earlier, trying to get views on Instagram or TikTok. Is there a way to do that authentically without feeling like you're forcing yourself to sort of become a social media influencer?
Totally, yeah, I know.
Especially with music, I sort of see those platforms as like, you know, very short attention span. People watch something for 10 seconds, go to the next thing, you know.
Totally.
I put out like I don't hashtag my stuff or anything, but I put out like a 3-minute recording of me like recording my music last week, and it said like the average watch time was like 10 seconds. Is it even good for those sort of platforms? You know, how do you take advantage of that without doing like following TikTok trends and things like that?
There's the thing, the funnel, right? I mean, the marketing funnel, right? Where you're kind of taking people from interest to, you know, engaged and considering, and then to where you can do something with them. I think that the TikTok and everything like that are top of the funnel, right? They have the widest reach and potential to create awareness for you, but like you said, it's a low engagement, right? So it's kind of like, it is kind of where you can start. I think the more important thing is to say, how can you get people into a more deeper way to engage you, right? And if you can find another way to get people to deeply engage with you through live or doing events or something IRL, do it. This is the conundrum that I deal with every single artist. They're just like, it's fucking work and it's a drag. And how I tend to get them through it is to say, don't rely on us to tell you what to do, like what feels natural. Like I was dealing with this artist the other day, and, you know, I think through conversation, we kind of figured out what she liked to do. And she was like, I'm recording, and when I'm recording, there's an energy to it, and I think I feel like it encapsulates what the experience of what I want to communicate to my fans, you know. And I was like, okay, well then let's get some cameras in there, you know, immediately, like record label guy, right? And she's like, no, because it will once the cameras are up, I stop. So we kind of workshopped it a little bit, and we kind of landed on this thing, and we're just going to experiment. We just landed on this thing where we're just going to put cameras and have it. She's going to record for 3 days straight, and we're going to have cameras rolling the whole time, and she's going to do just a 3-day live stream of it, just as an experimentation to see how her fans react to it. And that's why I say, like, with the social media stuff, I wouldn't, like, doing the trend stuff and everything. I mean, just, you look goofy. And if you have a bunch of fucking shit where it just looks like you're doing a bunch of trends. I mean, artists do that. The major label artists do that. You can see everyone who's just like getting the list of trends from TikTok every week, what's popping, and they're up there doing their shit. I think I would assume for most of the artists in this room, that would be just so cringeworthy and embarrassing, and you wouldn't want to tell any of your friends you're doing this. But I think if there's a way that you can, again, like, think about it just as like top funnel, what is natural for you, what makes sense. But I think the quicker that you can get people into, the higher engaged means, I mean, text lines are very interesting right now, I think. I think that Discord is really interesting if you've got that kind of fan base, that's in that world. It's really sticky. And again, even if you have 50 people on a Discord or 10 people on a Discord, you can do something with that and build. But then also you just don't do social media and figure out other ways to get your shit out there, because if you're not naturally attuned to it, it will come across inauthentic, and that it will be damaging versus like a productive thing, So I don't think you should force yourself if it doesn't feel comfortable, or you hire someone or you find someone that is really good at it and they just do it for you, which is what a lot of artists do. They're just like, fuck it, this person's going to do it, and maybe it's a friend, maybe it's someone who's good at it, or some whose content you like.
More questions? If not, Ben has more on that list. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Yes? No? Maybe so? Okay. Or. Aha! It's always when I turn my back. No need to apologize. Here you are.
Hi. So for a lot of people, I think self-releasing, is there any way to kind of talk about how one should do like pricing for their product, or think about like what a markup to keep their product sustainable to some degree is, that we could talk about? Like in terms of not just digital release platforms, though you can use that to like subsidize a more physical release, but if someone is actually trying to put out like a cassette or a CD or something, how they should look at like price point and all their inputs versus what they're actually selling it for, and what kind of negotiable loss or profit looks like for them to kind of make it so that they're not constantly like dumping money into the hole of like putting something out that they'll not recoup or something like that. Because I think a lot of people don't quite have a idea of how to price their product for themselves.
You're just talking like direct to fan kind of stuff on your own web store. Yeah. I mean, you're going to have your cost of goods sold, right? You're going to have shipping, you're going to have stuff like that. I think on a strategy wise, right? If you think about the array of products that you kind of put out, right? You have to really understand what your fans are. You know what I mean? There's some fans, some artists that can get away with really high end stuff, and like cut and sew T-shirts and stuff like that. I keep on going back to this. I wouldn't worry. I mean, T-shirt's going to be $20, a hoodie's going to be $45, an LP's generally going to be $20 to $25. I mean, those are kind of things. I think the question really is like the quality of it and how it ties into the story. If it just looks like you lazily put it up there and it's just kind of an afterthought, I think you'll have less engagement to sell through it. And I think that's more the important thing when you're getting a couple hundred shirts made or whatever. You don't want to be stuck with that inventory. So the question is how much will your fans value what does that T-shirt say in the larger story that you're telling, and make it. I mean, merch can be very interesting and part of the story and world building that you do. In terms of like margins and stuff, I wouldn't have much insight because that really just depends on, you just want to make it not seem like you're gouging your fans, but sometimes something that is really cheap to make, you can make like a pretty good margin on it if it ties into your story. You know, if you have a pin that's fucking amazing that says something incredible, the pin costs you 25 cents, you can sell it for $7. There's great margin on that. You know, so I go back to the creative. I mean, I always go back to the creative and the storytelling, because that's, to me, the most important thing to having successful merch is how compelling it is versus, you know, your price points or anything like that, or how much it costs to make. How do you go about doing that kind of like storytelling right now with your merch? I mean, what do you do to kind of make it tied in so that fans like need it as part of their fandom to you?
Most of the merch I have is mostly just actual physical releases, and I try and shoot for 50%, like at least double the cost of my inputs, cost of goods sold, and shipping.
So you're paying,
which
like,
keeps most things under about $15, because it's mostly cassettes that
Mm-hmm.
I have a pretty good personal, or not even personal, just like a good rate from like a fairly local company that does duplication, and
And
I
if
can
you're,
handle most things myself.
have your fans become used to kind of you as a cassette artist, and that's the expectation?
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah. So I mean, I think therein is your bag. You know, like I think there's so much cool shit that you can do with cassettes. You know, in terms of finishes and form and print and everything like that. You know, there's also there's like World Cassette Day. Do you know about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For like
Yeah.
there's like cassette store sort of thing, promotions.
I mean, I think you've figured out the most important part, you know, like distinguishing it and have it be part of your brand and your presentation and then, you know, if it would seem like vinyl would be incongruous and maybe a waste of your money, you know, if you've got your fans trained in a certain way, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two, like, I mean, in terms of vinyl, I think there's like just a lot of, like, people are fairly mystified by like what the startup costs look like versus like, you know, if you're putting 100 copies out of something and they're like $1,500 for like the cost of like everything from like dub plate to, you know, jackets, probably more honestly than $1,500 for a run of 100 records and stuff. And then you're like thinking
It's 15 a piece, and then you have to do your markup, and yeah,
exactly, like you're gonna hit a ceiling at some point.
yeah.
I think generally, like I'm probably about a decade into kind of doing stuff, either doing everything I can by myself except for like pressing vinyl or some professional like tape duplication that I don't feel like running a 3-to-1. I think a lot of that stuff is kind of mystifying to people generally who are like kind of looking to still do a physical product, especially when so much is just like digital now. But as far as like merch, and you know, the theme of this is kind of putting out good music on a tight budget and stuff, is like the idea of like talking about that a little bit, of like, what does this actually look like for people to kind of think about, like, how do I not lose my ass completely trying to put out merch, which you don't specifically have to have the answer for that, of course.
Well, I think you just have to know where you are with your audience and building, you know, like that's what I said earlier, like it is expensive to do vinyl. So if you're just starting off with a small audience, like t-shirts are very cheap to do. It gets your name out there. It's a way to express your identity. If you're on a real budget, that is a way you can take them on the road. You know, they're very portable. And that's why I said, like, that's kind of like maybe step one if you're on a budget, just in terms of merch, you know what I mean? Like, you got to know how many you can sell. You know, if you can't sell 200 pieces of vinyl, you shouldn't make 200 pieces of vinyl, because you're going to get caught holding the bag, you know?
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
I also had a friend of mine, it's an idea for like merch stuff that can be done differently and helps with the story idea and all that sort of stuff. His whole thing was like, the world doesn't need another t-shirt, but you need my t-shirt. And so he just went and found all these t-shirts that were like, you know, the $1 bin, pay by the pound.
Upcycled them, yeah.
Upcycled them, had them, like, dyed them, and then had his stuff screen printed. So he only paid for the screen printing and then sold them for like $55, which I usually would not buy a t-shirt for, but I was like, you did a lot of stuff here and took things out of the landfill and like all this sort of things that turned into like a very cool merch item, which I know that's like, you know, just one idea of how to
Well,
do
and
these
I think
things
the
that's different.
larger point of that is creating a story around the merch, and that's what I was saying earlier. How much does the merch drive and tie into your story, and how can you make a part of that? Because then there will be demand. If you've got 100 people who are like, okay, I believe in everything that you're doing, then if you make it part of the story, they're more likely to buy it, and it's creative, and then that can also become like your PR around it. You know, you have a wonderful story where you get pre-press out of, you know, an upcycled, you know, thing. They're also like, in terms of like upcycling and stuff, I don't know if you guys have this here, but in LA we have a place called Sway where they have dye baths and stuff. You know, you can make your own. You can go and get a shitload of t-shirts and stuff like that, like overstocks and dead stocks, and do them yourself. You know, it's sourcing it. I mean, I think to your point, what you're saying is sourcing your stuff, your materials for as low a cost as possible to increase your margins is really important up front too.
I'm going to mosey this way
Hey.
and do the closeout if no one else has any questions.
Wait, there was one more question that we hadn't addressed yet. How do you use data to plan your release?
My issue with data is that this music business is a highly subjective business that we're in, right? And it's all dependent on the music. So anything backwards is suggestive of what the song is. My issue with data is that it's always telling you a story in the rearview mirror. You know, it's telling you what happened. You kind of know what happened. Like, yeah, we had something going off on TikTok and we streamed a lot more and sold a lot more and sold a lot more tickets. I'm not really that like data. I'm not like that much of a data nerd when it comes to input to my process. It was funny. I was talking to, this is just an interesting anecdote of how it's done in K-pop. He was shooting. It's just interesting, not relating to you guys or the subject of this, but I thought it was interesting. Jenny, one of the members of Blackpink, they gave him 30 minutes to shoot her entire campaign. So he had to like build out these little like worlds, little vignettes and everything like that. He could only shoot her from a certain angle, a certain hue of light, 3 hues of lights and everything, because they had tested everything to see what reacts the best. So in the world that we live in right now, and K-pop's fascinating. I mean, I was going to say with merch, like, you know, if you can go in, they have amazing little ways of doing like cassettes differently, or like, you know, the K CDs and stuff like that that are fascinating, that you can like borrow little tricks from, you know, see what's out there. So there are segments of the music business that it's all data. I think where you guys, you know, come in, I think the data that's most important is how highly engaged are the fans? Like how many, like I think a really good piece of data when you log into Spotify for artists or whatever is streams per listener. You know, generally if you have like up 2 and above, it's pretty good. 3 and above, it's really high. If you see something at 3.5 or higher, that means you have a song that I think is really sticky and that you should look at it. So if you go through your catalog, if you see a high streams per listener on something, or a jump up in it, I think that's probably one of the more important metrics to look at. Obviously with touring, you can see the hot zones and kind of stuff like that. But I think when you're just starting off, it doesn't, you know, you have like 10 people in, you know, Dallas. That doesn't mean you should go there and book a show. But yeah, the anything that speaks to the quality and intensity of engagement is what you want to look at. You know, like how much people listen to, how much people engage with their posts, how much people share and stuff like that. I think reading data will allow you to understand as you're making content what's working for your audience. You know, I said the thing with we had an artist who they put a piece of content up that was color graded and it didn't do well. They took that down, they took the color grading off of it and they put it up and it reacted much better because for some reason TikTok doesn't believe in color grading anymore. So there's stuff you can play with. I mean it's, and again, you guys literally have access to pretty much the same tools I have access in terms of like reading data on stuff and reading. So, but engagement, quality of engagement, intensity of engagement is the number one thing because that means you have a real fan. And I think in terms of as you're collecting data on your artist, primary data, emails and phone numbers are the things that you should strive to collect, because that's the best data. That's data that is personal and direct, that you can turn into real dollars.
Cool.
Cool.
No last questions? No? Then we just want to say thanks to everyone out here. Thanks to the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust. Thanks for all of you. And Hansha, they have a gig tonight in New York, so they're in our hearts. But this has been, we're going to put this up online in a little while. So if there's anything you want to revisit or ones that you weren't at, we're the Rising Artists Foundation, and it'll be on our YouTube channel. And we hope everyone stays safe and has a lovely rest of your Saturday. Thank you all.
I have to run to the airport in like 20 minutes, but I'll be hanging for the next like 30 if anyone wants to chat. So
Thank you.